Lena stood in a crowded village square and told 40 neighbors that the blind old woman reaching for her was a stranger, a beggar looking for coins. 40 years later, in that same square, her own daughter would say the exact same words about her. The blind woman's name was Ruth, and she had lost her sight the same year she gave birth to the daughter now turning away. Ruth had raised Lena alone, learning her child in the dark, the heat of her small forehead, the shape of her mouth when she cried. She sold water spinach at the market and dropped every spare coin into a clay jar, saving for one dream: that her girl would never be looked down on the way a blind widow was. Lena grew up quick and lovely, and somewhere in those years she began to feel her mother's blindness like a stain she needed to hide. When the neighbors praised Ruth for raising such a fine daughter alone, Lena would smile and drift a step further away. Then Thomas noticed her, the only son of the rice merchant, the one family with a tile roof and a real wooden gate. For the first time, Lena saw a door out of the dust. She only had to walk through it clean, with no poor blind mother shuffling behind her. But another woman wanted Thomas too. Vera, a cloth merchant's daughter, wore jade in her ears and knew how to find the softest place in a person and press. Vera had watched Ruth tap her way along the market wall with a bamboo cane. She knew exactly which thread to pull. When Thomas's family agreed to the match, they threw open their courtyard for a betrothal feast and invited the whole village. Lena decided that night that no one there would ever learn who her mother was. She told herself it was only for a season. She told herself Ruth would understand. She had always been good at telling herself things. Red lanterns filled the merchant's courtyard, and the air was thick with roast pork and rice wine. Lena had never stood in a place so fine, and she wore it like she had been born to it. Vera arrived late in stiff silk and made a show of asking after the family. "Your poor father's gone, we all know that," she said sweetly. "But surely your mother came to see your great night." Before Lena could answer, the courtyard gate creaked open, and a small blind woman stepped in from the dark, guided by her cane and the sound of her daughter's name on every tongue. Ruth had walked 2 hours along the road in the dark. She only wanted to stand at the edge of the light and hear her girl be happy. "Lena," she called, reaching into the noise. "Lena, is that you?" My heart, every face turned to Lena. Vera's mouth curled into a smile, and Lena felt the tile roof door swinging shut in front of her. So she laughed, light and cold. That's just a beggar woman from the market. Somebody give her a coin and send her home." Ruth went still. She knew that voice better than her own heartbeat. She had felt it take shape under her hands when it was nothing but a cry in the dark. She could have called Lena's name again. She could have shamed her in front of them all. Instead, she pressed her reaching hand to her chest and let her daughter keep the lie. "Forgive me," she said quietly to the ground. "I have the wrong house." Then she tapped her way back out into the dark alone. One person left the feast to follow her. Martha, a widow from the lane who sold rice cakes and had no fine future to guard. Inside, Lena lifted a cup and let them toast her. She had stepped over something that night that a person can never step back across. She just didn't feel it yet. Lena married Thomas under a red canopy. And for 3 good years, she had everything she had traded her mother for. She wore soft cloth and ate white rice, and every time she crossed the market, she looked straight through the empty stall where a blind woman used to sell greens. Ruth had stopped going to the market. Martha had taken her in, and the 2 widows lived thin and quiet at the poor end of the lane. When anyone cursed Lena's name, Ruth only shook her head. "She's climbing," she would say. "It gets cold up there. One day she'll need someone to climb back down to." Then Lena had a daughter of her own. She named her Claire and swore the girl would never taste a day of shame or drag a poor relation behind her. But Vera had never stopped circling. She had married Thomas's business partner, and season after season she leaned close to the family's ear. She reminded them gently, always so gently, that Lena had come from nothing, and a woman who could deny her own mother could deny anyone. The blow came the winter the rice failed. Thomas's family wanted someone to blame, and Vera had spent years making sure the name in their mouths was Lena's. Thomas signed the papers that put her out. The woman who threw away her mother to get into that house was thrown out of it in a single gray afternoon. Lena walked out the wooden gate with a bundle of clothes and a baby on her hip back into the same dust she had clawed so hard to leave. She passed the poor end of the lane where her mother lived. Through the thin wall, she heard Ruth's voice singing some other family's children to sleep. She did not stop. Ruth died that spring, still humming lullabies for borrowed grandchildren. They buried her under the frangipani tree at the edge of the village, and her daughter did not come. Lena raised Claire hard in rented rooms, drilling one lesson into her above all others. Never let the world see your weakness, and never carry anything that slows you down. Time is patient. It waited 40 years. Until the day Lena's own eyes began to cloud and gray, the same slow blindness that had taken her mother. She was old now, and poor again, and leaning on the only person she had left, her daughter Claire, grown up and married well. Claire had learned her mother's lesson far too well. She was ashamed of the frail old woman squinting and feeling her way along the walls of her fine new house, when Claire's husband was named head of the district. The whole town was invited to celebrate in the market square. But he put on her best silk and told her mother to stay home, but Lena, half blind and aching to be near her only child, followed the sound of the drums. She stepped into the square with her hand out, reaching toward the daughter she could no longer see. "Claire!" she called. "Claire, my heart, are you here?" The words hung in the lantern light, and 40 years closed shut like a hand. Every guest turned to Claire. And Claire, feeling the eyes of every important man in the district, laughed lightly. That's only a beggar woman. Somebody give her a coin and send her home." Lena knew those words. She had said them herself in this same square under this same lantern light 40 years before. In that instant, she understood everything her mother had swallowed that night. The shame, the cold, the love that eats its own pain to keep an ungrateful child safe. She understood it 40 years too late to say she was sorry. She opened her mouth. She could have cursed Claire. She could have shamed her in front of them all, exactly as she had earned. Then she remembered what her mother did, so Lena lowered her hand. "Forgive me," she whispered to the ground. "I have the wrong house." And she turned to feel her way back into the dark, handing her daughter the same mercy her mother once handed her. But this time someone came after her, not a stranger. A small girl tore free of Claire's hand and ran into the dark after the old woman, Claire's own daughter, Emma. "Grandmother." "Wait," the child said, pushing her small hand into Lena's. "I'll walk you home. I'm not ashamed of you." Lena stopped in the dark and cried. Not for herself for once, but for a blind woman who had walked 2 hours home alone 40 years ago with no small hand to hold. Claire came after them to drag her daughter back before anyone noticed. She stopped when she heard her mother speak. "You did nothing tonight that I didn't do first," Lena told her. "You had a grandmother, Claire. Her name was Ruth. She was blind and she was gentle, and I let her die believing I was ashamed of her. I taught you to do to me exactly what I did to her. I'm not telling you this so you'll hate yourself," she said. "I'm telling you so it ends. Let it end with me. Don't hand this cold thing down to her, too." For the first time since she was a girl, Claire's proud face cracked. She sank down into the dust beside her mother and her daughter, and the three of them held on to each other in the dark. The next morning, Claire went to the oldest people in town and asked where a blind widow named Ruth had been laid to rest. They walked her to a frangipani tree at the edge of the village, its roots grown thick around a small weather-worn stone. Lena knelt at the grave she had refused to visit for a lifetime. She could barely see the stone, so she read her mother's name the only way left to her with her fingertips. The way Ruth had once learned her face. "You knew," she whispered to the stone. "All those years, you knew exactly how it felt, and you never once made me feel it." "I'm sorry, Mama. I finally heard you." Emma pressed the frangipani seed into the soil beside the stone, 3 generations of women knelt together in the dirt, and for the first time in that family, not one of them was ashamed of another. Pride had carried Lena up out of the dust, then dropped her straight back into it. What lifted her the second time wasn't pride at all. It was a little girl who wasn't too proud to hold a blind woman's hand. If you believe the way we treat our mothers and fathers comes back to find us, subscribe to Karma Tales. The next story is already waiting, and like this one, it will stay with you long after it ends.